Have you ever known someone like this? He always talks about big ideas, amazing dreams, and incredible plans for the future. He's passionate, full of energy, and speaks like he's meant to do something great in life. Maybe he wants to write a book, start a business, travel the world, or change the system. His eyes sparkle with potential. But there's one problem. He never actually starts. Or if he starts something, he never finishes. There's always an excuse. It's not the right time. I'm still figuring things out. People don't understand me. And so he keeps waiting and waiting. Carl Jung called this psychological pattern the Puer Aeternus, or the eternal boy. It describes someone who refuses to grow up. He may be an adult on the outside, but emotionally he's still living like a child, avoiding responsibility, running from structure, and staying stuck in someday. He fears stability. He avoids commitment. To him, a steady job feels like a cage. A long-term relationship feels like a trap. He wants freedom, but he doesn't realize that the kind of freedom he's chasing is really just a way to escape fear. The eternal boy lives in his head, in possibilities and dreams and fantasies. But he struggles to deal with real life. Deadlines, bills, follow-through, emotional accountability. These things overwhelm him, so he avoids them. He's not a bad person. In fact, he's often talented, kind, creative, and deeply sensitive. That's why it's so confusing, because you see the potential. You want to believe in him. But if he never chooses to grow, to take action, to face discomfort, then that potential stays locked inside him forever. And the sad part, the people around him, friends, partners, family, end up exhausted. Because they keep hoping he'll change, but he's still waiting for the perfect moment to begin. The truth is, he doesn't need more time. He needs the courage to land. The Puer Aeternus is not just a personality type. It's an inner pattern that keeps a person stuck in endless dreaming, while life quietly passes by. Real transformation begins when he stops preparing to live and finally starts. How do you recognize someone living under the influence of the Puer Aeternus archetype? Not every dreamer is a pure. Not every free spirit is avoiding responsibility. But there are signs, subtle at first and then painfully clear, that reveal when someone is not just idealistic but stuck in the fantasy of eternal potential. The first symptom is emotional avoidance disguised as independence. The pure resists any form of rootedness. He changes jobs frequently, claiming he's searching for purpose. He drifts between relationships, explaining that he's not ready or needs to find himself. But beneath these poetic justifications is a simple truth. He's terrified of commitment. Not because he doesn't care, but because maturity requires consistency, and consistency terrifies him. He fears routine because routine feels like death. He avoids responsibility because responsibility feels like confinement. He romanticizes freedom, but only the kind that asks nothing of him in return. Another common trait: he starts many things but finishes none. His world is filled with projects that were almost something, a business idea, a creative endeavor, a spiritual practice. He's enthusiastic in the beginning, overflowing with energy. But as soon as the work becomes difficult, when it demands discipline, structure, or resilience, he withdraws. There's always a reason. It wasn't the right time. The energy changed. The world just isn't ready. And perhaps the most painful sign of all, he sabotages the very things he claims to love. In relationships, he falls fast, speaks passionately, and idealizes his partner. She becomes his muse, his soulmate, the one who will finally understand him. But when the relationship becomes real, when it asks for accountability, vulnerability, or emotional presence, he fades. He says it's too intense, or I'm not good enough, or worse, blames the other person for not accepting who he is. To be close to a Puer is to live in a cycle of enchantment and disappointment. He promises the stars, and for a while you believe him. But eventually the sparkle fades and what's left is absence, confusion, and silence. It's important to say, the Puer is often brilliant. He's sensitive, intuitive, creative. But he lives in the realm of ideas, disconnected from the ground. He wants the fruit, but not the labor of planting. He wants the intimacy, but not the emotional work. He wants growth, but not the discomfort. And when life doesn't give him what he imagines, he doesn't adapt. He flees. From one dream to the next, from one lover to another, from one belief system to a new philosophy. Because as long as he's moving, he doesn't have to face the stillness where reality begins. At first glance, the Puer Aeternus seems radiant. He's full of life, dreams, and potential. He speaks with poetic charm, dreams boldly, and seems to carry an inner light untouched by the heaviness of the world. But as time passes, that light begins to flicker. Not because it fades, but because a shadow begins to emerge. Carl Jung warned that every archetype has a shadow, and for the Puer, that shadow is subtle, seductive, and quietly destructive. It begins with small acts of self-sabotage. He forgets appointments, neglects responsibilities, abandons projects without explanation. He rationalizes everything. I wasn't aligned. It didn't feel right. I need more space. But in truth, he is avoiding confrontation with himself, with others, with life. Over time, this avoidance becomes a pattern. He becomes unreliable, inconsistent, and emotionally elusive. People around him start to feel confused. Not because he's malicious, but because he's unpredictable. He says one thing, but does another. He commits, then retreats. He dreams of the future, but makes no effort to build it. And perhaps the cruelest part of this shadow is that he often makes others feel like they are the problem. If you ask for more, for presence, for stability, for maturity, he says you're too demanding, too heavy, or not understanding his nature. He romanticizes his inconsistency as freedom and your desire for connection as control. But deep down, he is afraid of failing, afraid of being ordinary, afraid of being truly seen. And so the shadow tightens. He becomes the very thing he despises, a prisoner. But it's not society that traps him. It's his own fear dressed as poetry. And this fear corrodes everything. Relationships fall apart, opportunities dissolve. Self-worth erodes slowly, hidden beneath layers of excuses and philosophical detours. He begins to resent others who have grown, who have chosen responsibility, who have stayed the course. He calls them boring, conventional, or lost in the system, not realizing he is projecting his own shame. This is the dangerous part of the Puer's shadow. It romanticizes stagnation and rejects the very medicine it needs. Structure, commitment, maturity. And those who love him? They are left exhausted, drained. They want to believe in his light, but are slowly consumed by his darkness, not because he harms them intentionally, but because he's unwilling to face the part of himself that has stopped growing. True healing begins when the Puer stops fleeing and dares to look into the mirror. Not the one that flatters, but the one that reflects the truth. Because until the eternal boy sees his own shadow, he will keep living in the illusion that he's free, or when in reality he's simply afraid to land. Behind nearly every man trapped in the Puer Aeternus archetype, there is a presence that is not immediately obvious but deeply influential. The mother complex. Carl Jung observed that the eternal boy rarely emerges from nowhere. His refusal to grow up, to root himself in reality, to step fully into adulthood, is often nourished by an unconscious bond with a maternal figure who, while appearing loving, also holds him back. This mother can be literal, an overprotective parent who did everything for her son. She picked him up when he fell, solved his problems before he could face them, made sure he was always comfortable, always safe. But in doing so, she unknowingly inhibited the development of autonomy, denying him the chance to build resilience, endure failure, or learn self-responsibility. Or the mother can be symbolic, a partner, a grandmother, even society itself, that unconsciously steps into the role of unconditional caretaker. She supports, nourishes, forgives, and enables, not out of malice, but out of love. And yet this dynamic creates a man who seeks not a partner, but a replacement mother. Someone who accepts him without question, who demands nothing, who shields him from the call to grow. To the pure, this feels like safety, but it is a psychic womb that slowly suffocates both. He stays emotionally dependent, expecting the feminine to rescue him from consequences, to understand without boundaries, to love without accountability. In return, the woman in this role, whether mother or lover, slowly becomes drained. She begins to feel like she's carrying an adult child. Her nurturing turns into enabling. Her patience transforms into exhaustion. And still the poor resists. He blames her when she asks for more. He accuses her of changing, of becoming cold, of not being like she used to be. But the truth is, she has simply reached her limit. Jung called this dynamic the devouring mother, though not because she intends to harm, but because her refusal to let go keeps the boy from being born psychologically. He may age physically, but emotionally he remains a child, comfortable but stunted. His life is lived in circles, never in depth. Breaking this bond is painful. It requires severing the inner dependence that says, someone else will make this better for me. It demands mourning the comfort of being cared for and standing alone for the first time. But it is also the first step toward individuation, because no man becomes himself until he releases the need to be mothered, and finally accepts the responsibility of fathering his own life. There comes a moment in the life of the Puer Aeternus when the illusion begins to crack. The dreams that once inspired now weigh heavy. The relationships that once felt magical are now marked by distance, disappointment, or silence. The projects that once burned with passion now sit unfinished, collecting dust alongside a growing sense of shame. This is the crisis point when fantasy collapses under the weight of reality. Carl Jung described this moment as a psychic breaking, a moment of reckoning. Not because the world has betrayed the eternal boy, but because the fantasy he's lived in can no longer protect him. The world hasn't become crueler. It has simply stopped waiting. Until now, he could drift. He could rationalize. There's still time. I just need space. The right thing hasn't come yet. But now, the clock ticks louder. His peers move forward. His relationships grow cold. His soul begins to ache, not for more freedom, but for substance, for structure, for something real. This moment is terrifying and necessary, because until this pain arrives, there is no motivation to change. The boy inside clings tightly to his myths. that love should be effortless, that success should be instant, that life should bend to his inner vision. But real life doesn't work that way. Real love requires endurance. Real work requires discipline. Real transformation requires loss. And this is where many men collapse or awaken. Some, unable to face the grief of letting go, double down. They blame the world. They spiral into resentment or withdrawal. They chase new highs to escape the weight of disappointment. But those who dare to stay, to sit in the pain, to mourn the illusions, discover something sacred. They begin to see that growing up isn't a betrayal of the self. It's the beginning of authenticity. It means mourning the imagined life, the perfect partner, the flawless future, the never-failing self. It means letting go of the belief that you are special simply for existing, and instead choosing to become someone who builds something, who stays, who acts. Jung compared this moment to a symbolic death, the death of the child ruling the adult's psyche. It is not the end of dreams, but the beginning of grounded vision. It is not the loss of creativity, but the birth of discipline. It is not the end of the puer, but his transformation. Because when the boy finally lays down his fantasy, something else rises in his place. A man who is no longer preparing to live, but truly begins. So what does it actually mean to grow up? After the collapse of fantasy, after the illusions have died and the pain has been felt, the Puer Aeternus stands at a crossroad. And for the first time, there is no one left to blame. No more time to waste. No more dreams to hide behind. Carl Jung described maturity not as a destination but as a transformation, a shift from a life of projection and potential to a life of presence and responsibility. The path begins with something few want to face: grief. Grieving the idealized version of yourself, grieving the promises you made to yourself that were never kept, grieving the time lost, not because you were lazy, but because you were afraid. It is a quiet and humbling pain, but through it something sacred is born. Clarity. You begin to see that freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's choosing what matters and staying with it. You begin to understand that love isn't a fantasy. It's a daily choice to show up even when it's inconvenient. You begin to realize that purpose isn't found, it's built through effort, through repetition, through imperfection. The mature man no longer waits to be ready. He acts in spite of discomfort. He builds even when he's uncertain. He loves even when it's hard. He doesn't kill the boy inside him. He reclaims him. The spark, the imagination, the inner fire, they don't die. They're simply placed under the guidance of a stronger, wiser psyche. Because creativity without discipline leads to chaos. But creativity with maturity, that leads to legacy. And yes, it's hard. It means showing up to work when you'd rather escape. It means taking responsibility for your finances, your health, your emotions. It means holding yourself accountable. Not because someone else told you to, but because you've chosen to become trustworthy to yourself. This is not the end of freedom. It's the beginning of real freedom. Not a freedom from, but a freedom through. Maturity is not about suppressing who you are. It's about building a structure strong enough to hold the fullness of who you are, dreams and all. And here lies the secret Jung hinted at. The Puer Aeternus doesn't need to vanish. He needs to grow roots. Because once he does, the man he becomes can finally carry the vision he always had. Not just in his mind, but out into the world. There comes a moment, After all the cycles, the dreams deferred, the relationships lost, the roads not taken, when a man can no longer pretend he has infinite time, this is the moment of final choice. The Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, has danced around this decision for years. He has blamed the world for being too rigid, too shallow, too unfair. He has resisted structure, feared commitment, and romanticized escape. But now, the excuses feel hollow. The stories no longer inspire, and the reflection in the mirror is no longer a boy with endless potential, but a man with fading time. Carl Jung said that life calls not for perfection, but for completion. And this is the fork in the road. One path leads back into the dream, into the familiar loops of evasion where nothing is ever quite ready, where every responsibility is postponed and every discomfort is avoided. The other path is the path of becoming, the choice to grow, not because the world demands it, but because the soul can no longer bear the weight of remaining small. But don't be mistaken, this is not an easy choice. Choosing to grow means renouncing the comfort of innocence. It means killing the illusion that someone else will come and save you. It means facing your past without flinching, owning your failures without defense, and stepping forward without a guarantee. It means working when you don't feel inspired, staying when you want to run, loving without needing to be idealized, committing without needing to be applauded. It means letting go of being special and learning instead to be stable. It means trading endless potential for actual substance, something real, even if it's imperfect. And perhaps the most difficult, it means accepting that the world will not wait for you to be ready. But within that truth lies power. Because the moment you choose to grow truly, deliberately, you reclaim your life. You are no longer the boy waiting for permission. You become the man who gives himself permission to act, to lead, to build, to love, to stay. This is the great crossing, the invisible bridge from potential to presence. And only you can take the step. So the question remains, will you choose the safety of illusion or the risk of reality? Will you stay in the dream or will you wake up and finally live it? The Puer Aeternus does not disappear in shame. He is integrated in strength when the boy inside learns to trust the man he is becoming. And that begins not someday, but the moment you decide, enough. There comes a time in life, especially in later years, when we no longer have the luxury of postponing ourselves. The story of the Puer Aeternus, the eternal boy, reminds us that it's not freedom to avoid responsibility, it's fear in disguise. For many, aging brings clarity. We begin to see how much time was spent waiting for the perfect moment, only to realize that moment never came. The deeper lesson is this: true freedom doesn't come from escaping life's weight, but from carrying it with purpose. Maturity is not about becoming rigid or losing your spark. It's about anchoring your dreams in reality, about choosing what matters even when it's uncomfortable. For older adults, this reflection is powerful. It's never too late to stop running from who you are and start standing for who you've become. The second half of life isn't about regret, but redemption. Stepping into your role as someone who no longer needs to be everything, but who chooses to be real. Because in the end, the deepest peace comes not from endless potential, but from a life actually lived.